So good morning and welcome to our live webinar today. I'm Josh Phegan, your real estate coach, and we've also got Matt Hayson from Cobden & Hayson.
Good morning.
Matt, welcome to the end of 2016.
Yeah, it's been a big year, hey?
Been a really big year.
Yeah.
So today we've got a whole number of people that are joining us from right the way around Australia. We've got New Zealand, we've got people that are logged in from the UK, which is pretty cool. We've got a couple of clients in the UAE, and we've got plenty of people obviously in a position today that really want to talk about how you actually have a much bigger future than your past.
Yep.
And I think that for a lot of agents, like, this is a great time to be doing some really good business planning
100%.
to look about what 2017 actually looks like.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you think that people should be concentrating on right now to start thinking about how they have a much bigger year in their career next year?
Yeah, look, I can tell you, so some of the things that we're working with is with our team, prospecting plan, what their ideal week looks like.
Yeah.
The number of calls, the number of appointments that they're really going to aim for. Obviously, the end goal, how many listings and sales they might be able to convert.
Yeah.
Making sure that their data is really clean on their database, so categorised correctly.
Yeah.
Making sure that you're getting committed around, all the things that work. What your prospecting plan is, what your listing plan looks like, how you're going to run open homes, so that you can come into 2017 with a really clear identity around who you are, who you want to be as an agent, where you're kind of getting your inspiration from, what's going to refuel your energy. And motivate you to keep going.
So the best thing I like to do with people at the moment is to just take a piece of A4 paper, draw a line down the centre of it, left-hand side, what's working well, and what's the stuff we need to work on. So that's really good. So we're doing all of these things great, but these are things we actually need to work on, and that's actually a plan for 2017. I say to a lot of people that, like, every business every year, doesn't matter which business you're in, you need to understand your margins and how you actually make your revenue. And the big drivers is to actually get a real clarity about what actually happened for you this year. So I say that there's only three numbers that we can manage at any one point in time, and that's things like average sale price. So next year in your marketplace, what's going to be happening to the average sale price? I was just over in Perth on Monday this week. We've had up to 30% price reductions in that marketplace. I've got clients in Port Hedland. We've had up to 75% off in terms of the price points over there. We've got other points here in Sydney where we're seeing 5, 10, even up to 20% growth over the course of the last 6 months in some of those markets. So it's actually learning market by market, where's your next opportunity actually going to be. So if you're going to think average sale price, is it going to be going up, staying the same, or coming back? Generally, I think most people are feeling it's going to be a relatively stable marketplace heading into 2017, and potentially coming back by maybe 5, possibly even 10% by the time we get to the end of the year. Is as a possibility, only because we've had so much unprecedented growth, particularly in the major capital cities and looking around Melbourne and Sydney. And even places like Canberra have had really good growth over that period of time. The second one is going to be average fee. The fee environment's been very competitive this year. I think that particularly with a lot of the publication of what a lot of the syndication sites have been doing on the TV, talking about how you can get an agent in your area at a certain fee and ring us and we'll tell you who the best person to use is. Off the back of that, we had the entrance of people like Purple Bricks into Australia, yet to be seen the impact there. But really conversations that now fees actually on the agenda. And I think that for agents, it's about determining your level of service. Are you going to be seen as the reject shop of your market, or are you going to be seen as the Louis Vuitton? Now, it doesn't matter where your brand fits, but it's important that you understand the positioning of what you're doing and what the customer's actually expecting for that particular fee level. So I'm going to say to people, is now the time that you should be increasing the fee, that you should be looking for some better things that you can be doing with your clients. The next one after that is then obviously going to be a really important one, which is going to be about volume. Total number of transactions that you're going to be turning at any one point in time. And I always say to people, if the size of the pie just got smaller in your market, you need a bigger pie. Or you need a bigger share of that smaller pie.
Been a big one this year.
So which competitors are you going to take out? Who are you going to be? What are you going to be doing so that they don't win business? Or which markets are you going to be moving into that should be your next secondary market? So if the primary is a bit smaller, then you can actually do that. And I think that Cobden & Hayson, you're a great example of that, where you very much were just on the peninsula in Balmain and Rozelle, and then you've seen some really significant growth in the brand because you're saying that, we want more opportunity at more pie more often. I think that's a really important part. And this is what I say to people too. In markets that are being challenged right the way around the country, it's fine to say that you're getting VPA, but you actually have to get it paid. And this is actually what I'm seeing happening, particularly in the Western Australian marketplace right now, is that a lot of people are actually getting the commitment from the vendor to pay for the marketing, but it's usually taken out on settlement. And so if these properties aren't selling, what's actually happening is that they're actually building a debt in the business in an overdraft to pay for the marketing as the invoices come in, and then they're putting themselves under pressure, not re-signing the agency agreements. The owners feel tied to the agency because they've spent the money, but yet they don't want to take the advice. And the agent feels weird about giving the advice or serving an invoice invoice because they haven't got the property sold.
Wow.
So that actually causes some really significant issues. And so you want to run a really clean business. And so sometimes in fee, it's not just about being able to get your fee, it's also about making sure you get your vendor paid marketing paid for.
Absolutely.
And ideally in installments. And usually in inner city environments, we see that we've got very strong business practices around that.
Yeah.
But as it starts to move out, there tends to be a little bit more of a relationship thing, and it's a little bit like, oh, we've known you for years, this will be okay. Yeah. And what actually ends up happening is that causes some massive issues in business. So think about it, average sale price, volume and fee. They're the only three numbers that I concentrate on building with any agent in looking at a much, much bigger business.
That's smart.
And I say to people like this year, do you want to live 2017 the same way that you lived 2016?
Yeah, I'd imagine most people would say no.
and the reason for that is that you're looking for areas for improvement. Yeah. And I'm looking at it in my own business to say, okay, great, what were the things this year that like maybe were a bit hard, or maybe were a bit like ugh, or a bit of a grind? Yeah. And which were the parts of the business that were like really fun and exciting, and how do I move to doing more of that more often? Yeah. And this leads me to the next question, which I think is a really important one for agents right now. Yeah. How do you see your role changing in the course of the next 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a good question I might ask you. Yeah. How do you see your role changing as an agency principal, as an agent, you know, and what you're doing with vendors and buyers?
Well, you know, working out of the city market, I think the value of an agent is being questioned quite a lot now with when you're seeing the average sale price and market growth of over 20%. So I think a lot of people are focusing on our fee and understanding, you know, if you're paying somebody $30,000-$40,000 for a fee, you know, what are you doing as opposed to somebody that's further afield that might only be getting paid 10? Aren't you delivering the same level of service? So for me, it's about, you know, really delivering layers of value for the customer so that they can understand the depth of what it is that we do and building our skill set and really demonstrating to the client, you know, the value that we really do bring to the table. You know, there's so many hidden costs that they don't see. You know, the effort that we put in with people like yourself with training, the CRM systems which are constantly, you know, being evolved, and the innovation that we spend, you know, with marketing and branding and teamwork, and you know, the buyer network that we bring to the table, and all of these kind of things that the client doesn't see behind the system.
Support, like
that's incredible.
Quality of photography, quality of copywriting, quality of brochures, getting yourself in a position that you got back office administration support, being able to get additional people there on the day of open for inspections, on the day of the auction to support those people. And you know what? Even what to do when a property doesn't sell, and having strategic advice around that.
Absolutely.
And this is what I think that a lot of agents actually, they undersell their services. And I was watching a great TV series. I was in LA 2 weeks ago doing work over there, and one of the things that we saw was The Profit by Marcus Neiman. And he says that like every single business is always about the margins. So I say this, okay, great. If you're going to be a great real estate agent, let me ask you a question. Do you actually know how much it costs your estate agency to sell a home? Now, I'm not talking the marketing costs. But it's all the fixed costs of the rent of the building, the branding, the franchise fees, whatever it is that you're involved with. Do you actually understand what the cost basis is per sale? And then if you have a look at that, then you need to then price yourself so you've got a clear margin above it called a profit margin. And profit is not an option. And what I've found is that we've got a lot of people in business today that don't actually understand their cost structure. So how the hell do they understand their pricing structure when they go to sell their services? I think that this is such an important part. A lot of agents too getting caught out with situations where they might have sold a property very quickly, and now an owner saying, well, look, can't we do a cheaper fee because it's sold so quick?
Correct,
But literally I say, well, it is a skill set, and the amount of energy and time that it's required to build really good quality buyer databases is going to be critically important. And that's not just something that people think, it's not just advertising that happens with that. The number of times that you'll pick up a phone and ring someone and say, you know what, Matt, you need to come and see this.
That's right.
And that person wasn't even in the market, and then makes a decision to pay much higher sale prices, a much better result.
I mean, having those intimate, and that's the thing, the deeper connections and intimacy that you have with a buyer, and the relationships that you build, which might be in our area in some instances well over 12 months to 2 years to find them the right home. And you know, you need, again, like for me, it's about kind of getting the client behind the scenes, getting them able to see the face behind real estate. So, you know, and I spoke about this at List, Sell, Negotiate. You know, I think there's a lot of agents that really sell the success. You know, the cars, you know, here I am in a flash house and all that kind of stuff. That's all good and well. I'm happy to, you know, celebrate success, but really, I think as an industry, we really need to take a long, hard look at ourselves and say, well, hang on, we're going to be disrupted if all we promote is the end value. You know, when it's really like they don't see the fact that, you know, for me, instantly, you know, I work 6 days a week. I have to sacrifice time with my family, my friends, and all of those kind of things because I have a dedication to doing the right thing by my clients.
Have I seen another hashtag sold over reserve by more than 250,000, whatever?
It gets down to like a street record for this week in this, you know.
We've got the highest sale price for a house with a yellow door this week. You know?
That's right.
And I say to people, look, at the end of the day, when the market changes, you're going to go the other way too. Sold for 200,000 below reserve. You know, like, and this is actually the change. That agents don't really see coming. In that, I think that for a lot of agents that have been really successful over the last couple of years, some of them actually haven't lived through market changes. No. When I first started my career, we came in just at the end of a market change, and so I've only ever worked in tough markets as a real estate agent. Yeah. And so, like, literally, when I see a good market, I'm like, how many people you got at an open? You got 10. That's amazing, right? And coming from a regional base, we actually really understand the importance of actually building relationships and being able to get property sold in a much shorter period of time. Yeah. You know, when you're in a market where 200 days is the average, to be able to get something sold in 40 or 50 days is actually a great outcome. Yep. And so this is a thing that I think that agents haven't really thought about the things that we're doing. And we were just talking to a whole heap of agents in Perth on Monday, and the conversation there was that they'd been doing a few properties off market. Yep. And the problem is that they haven't been there for advertising that it's been sold. Yep. There's no signboard up. They're not launching on the major real estate websites with a sold sticker over it. Yep. So how do you build social proof? Yep. And even worse than that, how do you give buyer confidence when you want to show a comparable to a property that's not even online? Yeah. You say, okay, great, so it was just like 27 Smith Street that we sold last week that made X. Yeah. It's just like that one. Yeah. Well, I can't find that online. What does it look like? What was the floor plan like? Yeah. But how did it compare to this particular property? And in those markets, when a market goes sideways, buyers get flaky around commitment. Yeah. And this is what a lot of agents aren't actually used to, because at the moment they're very used to buyers that are very committed, that they actually want to buy. Here's my 10% deposit check, and I want to do this yesterday. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a big change. Yeah. I think that for a lot of people too, heading into 2017, we see some big opportunities, but also some big challenges, and that's about like the first first quarter is always going to be about 7 auction Saturdays. Yeah, that's right. So that could tighten out to 6 if you don't do it until maybe February 18. Yeah. And then obviously too, for a lot of agents, there's Easter. So you got Good Friday, Easter Monday, Anzac Day, my birthday, and off the back of that, you've also got issues that the school holiday times are different in different states to where Easter is. Yep. If you're an agent and you're navigating and you're planning, one of the things you've got to do is you've got to start to look through the calendar, which months have how many auction Saturdays in it. Yeah. So like October this year was a big month because we had 5 auction Saturdays. Yeah. So which are the months that have 5 auction Saturdays, which are the ones that have 1, 2, 3 or 4, and actually start to really plan what it is that you're doing in your business rather than just happening to you. How would you be navigating that time scale, particularly from listing from now, you know, right the way through into next year to make sure that you've got a great first quarter and a great first half to the calendar year or end to the financial year? Yeah, well look, there's a couple of things there too that I say you also got to challenge the status quo as well. Who says you have to auction on a Saturday? I mean, there's 5 other, you know, perfectly fine days. You know, you can auction midweek as well, which frees up your Saturday. So you can kind of look at the time frame of how you. I mean, the bottom line is you want to start listing property straight away. You want to make sure that you're on the ground and running from mid-Jan, at least. You know, I would have thought. So that is going to be, you know, that first auction weekend of maybe 18th of Feb or something like that to run a good campaign. But then also, you know, look outside of the Saturdays. You know, look. You know, we're doing things in rooms on Thursdays, which then frees up your Saturday. You can do more open home inspections. You can clear your diary, and then you can work around things like, you know, the April, which has got the Anzac Day, the school holidays, and so how have you found in room? Because you know, there's a lot of agents, and particularly Melbourne, is very much on-site only. You know, how do you find having an in-room culture as well as on-site on Saturdays in your business? 100%.
Look, you know, our agents had the same challenges and you know, question marks, as indeed clients do. Clients have that view that, oh, look, people are emotional. They're on site on the day. They might pay a little bit more. Look, we've auctioned properties that have direct views to the Opera House and Harbour Bridge, you know, uninterrupted, and they're the most magnificent views you've ever seen. And we've auctioned them in rooms, and they've sold for hundreds of $1,000s above reserve. I've got to say, in rooms, the more that I do them, the more confident I feel that it is actually an incredibly strategic and powerful way about selling real estate. You know, you're in an environment where the clients are coming in, they feel like it's a transactional thing, that they want to come in, they're surrounded by other people that are bidding on other properties. They don't feel the nervousness that they're sitting in there and there's 30 neighbours and other 10 agents from different companies watching them. It actually is an environment where people transact with more confidence. So it's something to look at if you're not already doing it.
I think that, like, for a lot of agents too, is that you've got to understand exactly what you're doing for the client and how we're maximising sale price, but most importantly, how we're reducing stress. Yes. And I think that you know, one of my greatest lessons this year was to say to people that how can you take the pressure off the client? And I really like that idea of, like, you know, if you go and see Betty and she's 89 years old and she's moving into an aged care home or an aged facility, her number one issue is probably not about the moving process, the sale method, the pricing, whether or not using drones or video photography or online 3D floor plans. Her number one issue might be the fact that they've told her that she has to hand in her driver's license and she can no longer drive.
Yeah.
And so she's actually worried that she's not going to have the independence that she's had for the last 70 or 80 years of her life.
Yeah.
And so this is the important thing is that, going beyond the transaction and what does it actually really mean for the customer when they make those decisions around that.
Yeah.
So Matt, I think that's a really important question, for people to start thinking about when someone signs an agency agreement, what does that mean? And I think that a lot of people have a problem in working a pipeline because they don't actually think about what they're doing. Like, what does this mean for the client?
Yeah.
And it's all about them as an agent. And I love that Jason Boone always said, be a person first and a real estate agent second.
Absolutely.
And it's such an important part of what we do in running great practices.
Yeah, for me too, in this industry, it's just seemed to evolve over the last few years where people kind of come up and say, what's your GCI, how many numbers do you write and everything like that. It's like, well, hang on. First and foremost, I'm Matt, and that's who I want to kind of deliver to the client, and then we can talk about real estate beyond that because again, this is the thing where I think real estate, potentially some of the agents have got lost. It's become this robotical process of, numbers, listings, how many sold, how many calls, all of that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, well, that's all good and well. You've got to have that in the background. But most importantly, you've got to be understanding, there's a human connection part to all of this, and that's critical.
And I'd much rather have the human element, have that level of humility, have that level of drive, that real commitment to the customer than I would the flash car and the perfect suit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always say this to people is that I might not be the sharpest dressed, but I tell you what, I'm going to make sure that I'm the sharpest and the most focused when I'm working for you in being able to navigate the situations and the challenges of the day. And agents don't think about this. I was thinking about some of the sticky situations in real estate, an offer prior to auction. What do we do when there's only one person who wants to make an offer on a property in a for sale campaign? What do you do under multiple offers? And most agents, they get to a multiple offer scenario and then go, what do we do now? And do we get them to put their best and fairest in an envelope, or is it that we bring them in for an in-room auction, or do we shop around the offers between the buyers and do we reveal the price the other person's prepared to pay or not? And this is actually the challenge is that there's no clear guidelines in the agency. How the hell do you think the consumer feels on the other end? So we're saying to people now that great businesses in 2017 will really think about the customer frustrations, pest inspections, building inspections, access to contracts, strata, copies of strata things, but also to some fact sheets on those sticky situations. Absolutely. So as a consumer, if you're now in a multiple offer scenario, we'd like to give you our fact sheet. This is actually what happens during a multiple offer scenario. The owner gets to elect between these 1, 2 or 3 different approaches. The owner is elected for the second approach, which is a boardroom auction. This is how that works. So then that way it's very clear and very precise, because for the people, this is a very stressful event. They might have sold a property, now technically homeless, need to buy something. They want to know how to perform, but yet we're not actually giving them that idea to say, well, turn up and let's see how you go.
I'm sure like in Sydney, Melbourne, that kind of stuff's happening on a daily basis, and you're right, and everybody does handle it differently, and that's where the consumer gets lost. There's no clear direction.
And I think that even in an office that there's levels of weakness and strength that maybe the key agent might, but other agents are saying, I don't know what to do here. Nothing worse than getting an offer and acceptance on a property, driving over to the buyer's home to actually sign up a copy of the contracts, and all of a sudden another buyer rings you and offers $3,000 more. And you're like, well, so what do I do in that scenario? Well, we've made a verbal contract, you've rung the buyer back and said, congratulations, you've just bought the home. The other buyer's just rang and said, now we're going to give you another $3,000 more. What are you going to do? You're going to go back to your owner? Well, of course you need to. You need to have that conversation and know how to deal with that, but also to understand the importance of honouring the word and being clear about what it is that you do. And if you do that, you'll make some really big changes in your business.
And I think you touched on a thing that I just kind of picked up out of that, where I feel that some agents probably lack a little bit of skill is the communication. The ability to make the tough calls, the ability, even if you are accepting an offer, just to say to people, look, we are accepting this offer, but you've got to put up that red flag just in case of a scenario like that happening, where you can say to the client, nothing's set in stone until it's exchanged unconditionally. We're doing all of our best efforts to make this happen in a quick time frame. But just so you know, there was potential competition in the background. We think we've isolated and it's all cooled off. But people do crazy things, and that's the thing when you're dealing with the general public. You've got to be aware for crazy stuff, because people genuinely are crazy out there. So
and I love that quote by Muhammad Ali, right? Actually, be the competitor. Now I think about this in terms of what's happened to you in 2016, where you're actually a competitor in the field. Did people see you as being a competing agent? And the best way to be a competing agent is to be the role model. Like best on ground with your DLs, best on ground with your videos, best on ground with your phone calls, best on ground with doing all of those things that other people just aren't doing. And I think that makes a massive difference in that, don't be worried about what others are doing, but worry about what you're doing. And the more that you do that, the better off you're going to be in terms of results.
For sure. If I look at this industry, there's a fair amount of cloning that goes on.
Yeah.
And again, look, this comes back to that human element. When somebody comes in contact with you, are you a scripts and dialogues person, or are you working under an umbrella of that, but then styling it to who you are so that you're comfortable as a human?
Understand the psychology. Yep. What do I want this person to know? Yep. What do I want them to feel? And what do I actually want them to go and do as a part of that?
Yeah.
So, mate, we've got some great questions now that we're going to answer for a number of people today. And there's still a chance that if you want to put in your questions, you can put it in below. We're actually streaming today live, not only on Facebook, on the Josh Phegan website as well. And so that's a massive part of actually changing the way that we think about technology.
Yeah.
Here's a great one from Sandra over in New Zealand. She says she's really loved listening to the audio, and she's really been being involved in that. However, one of the things that she's a little bit worried about is actually chasing vendors or potential vendors, and actually maybe potentially being a bit annoying.
Yep.
And what are your thoughts on this about how you actually can do that without being annoying?
Yep.
What are your thoughts?
Well, Sandra, for me, there's always something relevant happening in your marketplace, whether or not that's a recent sale that's in the surrounding area, in the street. There's what's happening with buyer movement, how many people have come through all of your open homes over the weekend, your auction clearance rate, what's happening in the market, what's happening with interest rates. I mean, there is so much stuff happening that you can...
There's also community stuff too.
Community stuff, yeah.
Like at the moment in your marketplace, you've got West Connects, which is a massive freeway project, which is going to change a whole range of things. Yep. There's a potential of Bunnings happening in Balmain. There's issues then.
Power station.
There are lots of different things that go on all the time. And what people don't think about is what does that mean for prices?
That's right.
And like I look at that in that, how do you take a human interest story and make that interesting for the human and actually get them to understand what that might do to property prices?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important part. Like I know that if I was in Matt's marketplace, that's got the opportunity to be the next San Francisco of Australia. In that if they're thinking about Google doing that power station redevelopment, a lot of the people want to walk to work or ride to work, because that's the sort of company that they are, Segway to work, and that might mean that all of a sudden that completely changes prices in the inner west if you're in and around that. And so that means that for people you need to think about it. But to answer Sandra's question, a couple of things I do here at the end of every conversation, make sure that you're getting permission for when the next key time to follow up is, and don't nominate a time. Let them nominate the time. So Matt, based on that, when should we speak next?
Yes.
If Matt says never, you know that we've really crossed the line. If Matt says 3 months time, it's okay, great. What are you hoping is going to change in 3 months time? Well, I'm hoping that the job relocation is going to have come through. Hoping that we've been able to get the kids into the next school. Okay, great. So would it be okay if I maybe touch base in about 6 or 7 weeks just to see how that's progressing? So we're now starting to. I'll pencil it in the diary. I love that terminology too. I'll just pencil it in the diary and I'll give you a quick call then, as opposed to I'm going to put you on my database with my automated follow-up sequence and then put you in as an activity plan and see whether or not I give you a couple of calls, several emails and 4 SMSs prior. So learning that is important. I think the other thing too is to say, look, Sandra, we're now at this point. What can I do to be of value to you from here?
Yes.
And what I tend to do with clients that are in similar situations is to maybe get on the phone and ring them if I think there's a significant sale that they should know about.
That's right.
And so usually it's about the sign-off and the setting of expectations. How do you set the expectation? How do you actually then sign off with the client so you can do great work? Let's go and have a look at our next question. We've got one from Joe. Joe Marshall, she's in the Bay of Plenty from New Zealand. She says, what is the one activity you should be doing at this time of the year to assist us to finish strong? I think that's a great question. Is it door knocking or direct mail drops, phone-based calls? What are the things that we should be doing to really shift and get that business to be more dynamic?
So for me, it's kind of closing off, looking at all my my pipelines for next year. Knowing the people, like sensing where their level of urgency is, and spending as much time with them as possible, so that I know that I'm either signing them up or I know, as you've just touched on, when is it going to be the next time that I'm going to touch base with them. I'd be setting that up so I know clearly where I'm going in my diary for next year, and that's how I'd be probably spending my time right now.
I'm a big one for cleanup. So I'm thinking that over the year we've collected a lot of people in these databases and a lot of systems. Are those things actually serving us well? So right now I'd be back on the phone to every single buyer that's apparently in our database, and I'm just going to be asking them a very simple question. Hey Matt, Josh Phegan calling. We've got you down as a buyer. We just want to see, have you still got an interest in trying to secure a property at this point? Tell me a little bit about that. Did you end up buying one, or have your plans changed, and why have they changed, and what could we do to be of value to you? Is it still worthwhile sending you the buyer alerts, or can we send you some other things that are happening in your area 100%. And starting to get that shift on? I'd also be getting a direct mail piece out. I think this is a great direct mail as opposed to a letterbox drop to every single past client who's ever bought from us, but also in addition to that, every potential seller that we've currently got. I'll be talking to them about how we've seen things like Trump, Turnbull and Brexit, and no major issues in financial markets off the back of that, which is amazing that 3 really significant events happened happen this year. And next year's pretty much a boring year because there's not really much going on. I think there's some council elections maybe in Sydney. But, so from that point of view, we got through some really significant issues. But I'll be talking to them about, well, we expect that there's going to be a lot of Super Saturdays in late March and early April. If you're in an auction market, what does that mean? A lot of supply all of a sudden at once. That could be the next tipping point. So does that mean that January and February is actually a better time to sell? And that anyone that you've got on who's ready to go to market, maybe list them today as a forthcoming auction. Don't put a date and time on it. Put a board up out the front that says forthcoming auction. Do 1 or 2 open for inspections on the Saturdays leading up into Christmas. You might actually get it sold. And or if not, to put an overlay on it for a February auction date, just as we get into early January. And now you've got your campaigns kicking and your open homes going, and you've got your lead generation cycle of the buyers that you're going to be meeting who are going to be buying properties that you can cross-sell onto, but also to the potential sellers for the next quarter.
Yeah, right. Well, that's all momentum, isn't it?
And that's what life's about, right? Is just that you've got to find a way. And this is what I'm saying to people. Don't get so stuck that, it's this time of the year. It's a mindset. Put the air conditioner on if it's hot, or if you're in the UK, put the heater on if it's cold, and get yourself in a position where you're actually just getting on the phones to go and work with people.
100%.
So Amarada in Holland Park, just a great question. Started in real estate this year, really focusing on a database of all of the people that she already knows. But it kind of feels that she's exhausted that avenue a little bit. I need to start building my database again. What's the first thing you would do?
There's a lot of things. I'm not sure what office you work in there, but there's old OFI books that you can work through. Like as you've just touched on there, really cleaning your database and understanding, what kind of trails and levels of connection you want with all these varying people. For me, I'd be working really hard on buyer work. Like understanding where people have come from. Have they missed out? Are they going to roll into 2017? I'd be probably starting there.
I think the big thing for me is that I look at the word exhausted. Those people in my database. I'm like. It kind of might sound that we potentially could have just got on the phone and said, "Do you want to sell?" So I've rang everyone, and everyone said no. So we'll learn how to provide value. Say, Matt, would it be okay if I let you know if there's a significant listing or sale? If that happens and you do that well, you got a great business. And when we see guys like Alexander Phillips at the top of our industry, that is the number one thing that Alex has done, is that he just continues to keep on providing value as that database builds. But what I think is an important lesson here is that you must build and work a database at exactly the same time. Sometimes people build it, they go, I want to go and rebuild it. No, you've already got the data there, learn to work with it.
That's right.
That's what I say in our business to my team as well. If I got to the discipline of calling every single person who gets the daily email from us, all 8,000 people, could you imagine what that would do for our business? And so that's the important part, is that there's always work to be done. The question is, what's the best value work for you to be doing now? Let's have a look at Will's question from Dural in New South Wales. He says something interesting. He said, how would you counter you haven't sold much recently, or you don't have any listings in our suburb?
Look, it's an interesting kind of question, but look, there's a whole heap of things, that you're obviously looking at. I'd be probably identifying a couple of key things around, what has sold in their marketplace that's of relevance. I mean, if you're a younger kind of agent, I'd be coming in with, look, there's energy, there's enthusiasm, there's the World Wide Web. We've got broader buyers coming from different markets as well. For me, I'd probably talk about a lot of that stuff.
I always think that, people buy the story.
And
interesting
enough,
the person with the best story wins. And this is about the idea that you're selling. And true story, one of my clients recently went into a listing presentation. He's the key agent. He's dominant. He's done very, very well this year, and quite publicly. And he walks into the vendor says to him, "Look, I'm going to tell you, we're not actually going to go with you." He says, "Okay, great. Why is that?" And he says, "Oh, we're not going to go with you because the agent we just had back in has identified that you are really good at what you do." He said that you've made a lot of money this year and you don't need any more. And he said that he hasn't made much and he really needs the sale. So we're going to give it to him because we think he's going to try harder. And I always think about that when Avis positioned themselves as try harder, and what that did compared to Hertz when they're going up against the number one. The number one doesn't always win, and people love an underdog. So never forget that, Will. That's an important part.
For sure.
Got our last question from George in Hunters Hill. He says, what's a great book to read about negotiation skills? Well, starting to read is a great thing for I think a lot of agents could do. I think there's lots of different things that you could read. In negotiation, I really like, for example, Getting to Yes by William Mugrai. I think that's a great book. I also think too about maybe starting to think like 3D negotiation, that's good. But Robert Cialdini just wrote a brand new book that came out this year called Prefluence, and it's everything that you do before you get to the point of actually having the conversation. And so that's really actually setting that up so it's the right thing. Owen Claff wrote a great book too, which is called Pitch Anything, and that really does help you from a negotiation point of view. Matt, for a lot of agents, I'd say You're going to be doing a lot of Netflix and chill potentially over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks. Best thing for you to be doing is to actually starting to think about how you can get better in your career. And I'd really encourage you to jump on, have a quick look at things like membership. There's now all the new videos from this year's Blueprint. It's just dropped with all the new audio, all the new short courses, foundations if you're just starting out, putting on a PA, all of those things. That should be your new Netflix. Get in there, get ready for a really great start to 2017. And don't think it's the end of the year, because 2017 already started about 4 weeks ago. So let's get ready now. Matt, thanks so much for your contribution this year.
Thanks very much.
And thanks so much for being on our live stream. Look forward to seeing you in 2017.
Good luck.